Hi, welcome to my webinar. I believe I'm starting recording right now. So this presentation will be a little bit more about my Gold Award project, which I've called Regrowth Gold Award, and it focuses on documenting the regrowth of Alexander's Meadow post-prescribed burn. And if you don't know what that means, hopefully by the end of this webinar you will, and I encourage you to go ahead and after this is done, if you haven't already, to watch the documentary or the mini documentary, which is linked on this website, and check out the website. So here's a bit of background if you don't know more. And as a welcome, I'm also going to go over what we're looking at today in this webinar. So firstly, we're going to go over quite briefly prescribed burns and their benefits, as well as some of the native species in Alexander's Meadow. But as I mentioned, this is the main topic of my Gold Award. So to learn more about these things, again, I encourage you to go watch the actual documentary and check out the website, but we will go over that a bit today. And also, this webinar will focus mainly on a little bit more about my project and about my process. And as you're watching, if you have questions in the live chat feature to the side, go ahead, ask any question you might have, and I'll answer it live during the webinar while this is presenting to you. But for those of you who don't know anything at all about my project right now, here's a bit of background information just to help you, find some footing, and then we can go into a bit more detail. So Alexander's Meadow is located within the Somerset County Environmental Education Center in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And it is named for former landowner William Alexander, who farmed it in the late 18th century, so hundreds of years ago at this point. And right now it's a meadow managed by this environmental education center located in this town, and it uses prescribed burns each and every year. And when I talked to my project advisor, he said that the prescribed burns had a bit of a negative stigma surrounding them, which is the main reason why I decided to take on this Gold Award and to document the regrowth. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the actual Gold Award terminology and the Girl Scout kind of why I'm doing this. So the Gold Award is the highest honor that a Girl Scout can earn. I'm a senior in high school, so I've been doing Girl Scouts since kindergarten. It's many years now. I've been excited to do this project for a long time. And it requires a take action project that is sustainable and carries on. And I can go into a bit more about what that means later. It's also important to have aspects of community engagement, getting the word out to many people. So hopefully, as you're watching this, you'll be inspired to watch my documentary to learn something new. Let's get started and look at an overview of what prescribed burns really are. So they are an important meadow management tool and a forest management tool, but since my documentary focuses on the regrowth of a meadow in particular, we'll be focusing on its uses as applicable to that situation. And it has a variety of benefits, one of which might seem a bit counterintuitive, which is preventing wildfires. So the prescribed burn is very controlled and very safe, which means that it's removing all the debris and dead plants that could potentially cause a wildfire that's uncontrollable by burning it in a very controlled and incredibly safe way. So there's nothing to worry about there. In addition, it makes sure to recycle the nutrients from the old dead plants that fill the meadow in the wintertime, which is when the prescribed burns take place, back into the soil as elementary nutrients, helping to fuel the regrowth of the meadow in the next year. And finally, this one was very interesting to me and inspired a lot of research on my part. It helps native species to compete with invasive species. It essentially sets a level playing field in the meadow each year and allows them to compete at a more equal footing than when the invasive species are coming in and competing when the native species are already fully grown. Because even though it seems like an invasive species is able to outcompete the native species, this level playing field really enables the native species to beat the invasive species. And it doesn't eliminate the invasive species entirely, but this level playing field certainly does help. So now that we've gone into a bit of the benefits, one of the ways that it's safe is that it's carried out by professionals who know what they're doing from the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. So a bit more about that department. It is the New Jersey agency that actually comes in to burn the meadow every year. They burn about 30,000 acres per year statewide on private land and public land alike. And the process is very safe because they obviously know the right techniques, they have the right gear, but they also make sure to alert the neighbors, and the park as a whole is closed during the days of the prescribed burns to make sure that a passerby would never ever get too close to be safe. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more about this agency, to watch my documentary, check out my website. I believe I put a link to their official website there. And you can see in this image, they're all wearing their fire outfits. They have safety tools, and they're actually in Alexander's Meadow in this picture. And this picture is courtesy of my project advisor, Dan Ross from the Environmental Center. So as I was saying, if you want to learn more about prescribed burns, which I encourage you to do so, especially if you're still confused or still think they're more negative than positive, to go ahead and check out my documentary and my website. For this one in particular, I would check out the documentary because it really shows the process of regrowth over many months, showing you how the prescribed burn in reality helps the meadow to thrive more than hurting it. So the native species is one aspect of the project that was very fascinating to me individually. I think they're super important to help preserve native biodiversity instead of giving way to invasive species. So as I was mentioning before, prescribed burns benefit these native species as they compete with invasive ones by creating this level playing field, as I went into detail about before. And I made sure to document many native species that I saw that have a variety of ecological benefits throughout my project, and we'll look at just a few examples today. But I encourage you, for this one in particular, on the website, there's a page dedicated to native species that I continue to update to this day as I keep on finding more and more benefits that I want to add and highlight on my website, as well as on the social media pages. So here's just a couple examples of ones that are featured in the documentary that you can check out. So let me get my pointer here. This one up here is Indian grass. There's a variety of types of warm weather grasses in Alexander's Meadow, and this is just one of them. I don't have a picture here, but there's also Timothy grass, big blue stem grass, and they all are very beneficial in helping insects and small animals, providing shelter. So yeah, and the grasses make up a very big part of Alexander's Meadow. The next one that I want to pull your attention to is this wild bergamot, this pretty pink flower that I have featured in the documentary, and it's on the website. And I got some great shots of this one with bees and pollinators on it because it does really benefit them. And you can see that with your own eyes if you ever go to visit Alexander's Meadow. So yeah, the black-eyed Susan is one that you probably have seen at gardening stores and around. They're very pretty yellow flowers that look like tiny sunflowers in their coloring. And they also benefit pollinators and help benefit the entire ecosystem as a whole. So next, this one that has these very pretty pink flowers is common milkweed, which is very beneficial to butterflies. I don't have a picture of it on this slide, but there's also Joe Pye weed, which looks kind of similar and is also incredibly beneficial to butterflies and other insects. Up here, I'll call your attention to the fleabane species. There are a couple different fleabane species, but they all look like these cute little daisies, and they benefit insects, small animals as well. Down here we have common yarrow, which is another pretty white flower, and up here we have some sensitive fern, which typically grows smaller, but in Alexander's Meadow, in this particular area, it was growing a bit bigger to compete with the other nearby species. And down here, I want to draw your attention to something I thought was very cool when I was talking to my advisor about it. You can't tell exactly what this plant is based on the picture, so I won't go into detail about that. But this little white sap is actually a spit bug. So the spit bug goes, they take a bite of the plant, they spit it back up, and then they use it as a shelter. So I thought that was cool, and I wanted to draw your attention to that because I don't really go into detail about that on the documentary, but I am highlighting it on my website and on the social media. So now that you've seen a taste of these native species, I invite you, if you want to learn more about them, check out the documentary and the website. And I've underlined a website because in particular, that's what you should check out to learn a bit more about native species. As I mentioned, I have that whole page dedicated to them. So finally, here is about my project and my process. This is the first time I'm presenting actively about this. Now that my project has really come full circle, I've started to release a documentary and share it on numerous channels. So in March, I came up with my project ideas, met my project advisor, and got my proposal approved. This process definitely took a while and definitely had some surprises along the way. But first, before we go into that, I'd like to say a very big thank you to my project advisor, Dan Ross, who is the Environmental Stewardship Coordinator at the Environmental Education Center and has helped me so much throughout this project. So as you might be thinking, what happened in March of 2020? Well, the coronavirus pandemic greatly hit the US. My school went virtual. Everybody was staying home, wearing masks and social distancing, and we didn't know what was going to happen. So this greatly altered my project. I remember I had already planned it out for the most part, was about to submit my proposal when things really started going crazy. And then everything started going online and I didn't know how to adapt the project at first. I also thought it would blow over a lot quicker than it actually did. I thought by this summer I would be able to do a presentation like this one in person, maybe at the library or in the environmental center, in person with crowds of people watching instead of a live stream from my room. Obviously things didn't happen like that, but keeping pushing forward and sharing this however I can. So between the months of March and July, for the most part, I did weekly visits. Sometimes these were not actually weekly. They were every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, depending on other things that I had to think about with this project, spreading out the timeline enough so that I had pictures from every single month. And of course, restrictions with coronavirus travel, which I will go into a bit more. So I attempted to visit the Meadow once per week from March to July. As you can see in these pictures, the top one is all the way at March when the Meadow had barely begun to regrow. That was my first or second visit. And then the photo at the bottom is probably my last visit or sometime in June or July, where the plants are definitely pretty much grown. So definitely shows my experience full circle. I had to look out for park closures in April due to the coronavirus, even though there's usually not a lot of people all crowded together in the environmental center because the grounds are so big, so people are all spread out. The parks were still closed in April for quite a few weeks, which meant that it was a bit more challenging for me to go and get pictures, especially during this time period in which so much was growing back. But I'll get into that a little bit more on the next slide. I also had to be careful to be mask wearing and socially distant when we did see other people on the trails sometimes after the initial closure happened and the initial shock. So on these weekly visits, my mom drove me, so thank you to my mom. She walked with me through the woods. I brought my DSLR camera, which I borrowed from my sister, and I used an iPhone microphone for recording sound bites. COVID-19 definitely had an impact on my project. I was so lucky that my whole family and myself have been safe so far and that I was able to continue working on this project, and I had the privilege to have everything that I needed and be able to have a project that could be worked on virtually. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And I just had to make sure to make all the appropriate changes to still spread the word about my project with other people. As I was mentioning, I had already planned most of the project before the pandemic hit, meaning that I had to make a lot of adjustments and changes once I learned the restrictions that I would have to follow and learned that it was going to be a little bit longer than 2 weeks. So as I mentioned, the park closures mid-April, as you can see in this picture that just popped up on the side, Instead of going into the meadow, I had to drive up on the road, which you are able to see it from the road when you're driving by in the wintertime when there's not a lot of leaves on the trees. So that's how I had to take pictures and document. I brought a zoom lens with me to try my best to get close-ups, but the angles were pretty limited during this time period to this angle, as you see in the picture. So as further impacts, I was hoping initially to bring volunteers to help document and record pictures of flowers and grasses to identify which species they were. I couldn't really do that since while I was documenting, the rules were still extremely strict. I also couldn't host a screening as I was hoping to at the library. So instead, I'm doing my best to publicize things online. As you can see in the picture, my mom and I were wearing masks on the trail one day, so we took a nice selfie of us together. So after the whole documentation process, I went ahead and created the documentary. I've gone to classes at NJ Film School for many years now, so I've learned a lot about documentary editing and cinematography, and that really played an important role for me in, first of all, choosing the project, but also my ability to complete the project in this socially distant setting where it's a bit harder to get a hold of people for help. I ended up counting about 700 clips total, including images and clips, and I used a mixture of them. Also, a big thank you to my advisor for providing me with a repository of photos from the burn. I wasn't able to actually be there and record it, and I was going to attend a burn of another meadow, but then COVID hit, so I wasn't able to do that and get the footage. But luckily, I was able to get these images from my project advisor, which were excellent. You saw one on a previous slide, the one of the different New Jersey Fire Forest Service rangers standing around at Alexander's Meadow about to burn it. I used Final Cut Pro to edit promotional videos, the mini doc, and the documentary. It was definitely a long process. It took about a couple days of editing, 2 or 3 hours a day, to actually get the first cut together, which was about 12 minutes long. I then shared it with a couple volunteers and, of course, my project advisor. My project advisor helped me to improve the accuracy of plant identification and include some other minor factual errors. And as a whole, everybody who viewed it said that the best way to get more people to watch it would be to shorten it down a bit, make it a bit more short and sweet, and also create that mini documentary that's even more short and sweet. So I made sure to do that. That was another couple days. And finally, over this week, I've been exporting and uploading them and doing my best to get the word out and to get people to watch it. And as I was saying, editing was definitely a back and forth process that took a long time, lots of perseverance to get through when something wouldn't work right. And there were lots of stumbling blocks along the way. But now that I have the documentary, along the whole course of the project, I've also been working on a website and a social media following, not only to spread the word about the project itself, but to help educate my community. So the website has many different pages, ranging from a page that has an actual video player to watch the documentary, to a page that features all the species, to a page with various links to the Environmental Center and other articles that are interesting to read. So I definitely ask you to check that out if you're interested. On social media, I've gained close to 200 total followers between platforms and counting. And the two platforms that I've been using are Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, I have mainly peers my own age, as well as some adults, people from the community and outside of my community. And on Facebook, I've been using that personally to share with other people. My mom and I sometimes share it with our friends on Facebook, like, hey, check out my project. And the Environmental Center is also going to share the video on their social media, which is very exciting. And as I was saying, all resources will be linked in the description. I created a link tree that has links to everything you could possibly need to learn about my project, including the mini documentary, both social media pages, and the website. So I implore you to check that out if you want to learn more. So finally, to get the word out about my project, first of all, thank you so much for attending this webinar. It means a lot to me that you wanted to learn more about my project. I'm posting a QR code as a sign near Alexander's Meadow to access the documentary. So if an individual might be walking by and wonders, I want to learn more about this meadow, then they can easily access it. And also, I'm very excited about this, but my project advisor said that they're going to play it in the Environmental Education Center exhibit hall, which is an educational resource that is currently closed, but this is what it looks like. There's an iPad that they're going to be playing it on there. So very excited for more people to watch it there, and I know that that will continue to go on after my project is done. I was also sharing the word with members of the film club at my school who might be interested in documenting it some more, but clubs this year are a bit different due to COVID, so it might be me sustaining it for this year and then sharing it with them later once clubs get reinstated. So as this webinar closes down, I would like to say, feel free to ask any questions you might have in the chat to the side. I'll do my best to answer them. And I'd like to say some thank yous to my project advisor, Dan Ross from the Environmental Center once again, Mrs. Kramer, who is my Girl Scout advisor and my Girl Scout troop leader for many years of fun Girl Scout activities and for advising me along this particular project. My mom for driving me to the Environmental Center weekly and always helping me with new ideas for the project. And my group of volunteers who helped to pre-screen the doc. I'm very grateful for your help with my project and for helping me to refine the documentary in a succinct and interesting way. So that's all I have today. Thank you to you for watching the webinar, and hopefully feel free to check out any resources that I have linked, all in the description below. Bye.